And I'll often ask them, is there a Seder in Yeshiva where you guys are watching videos? And they're like, yeah, out of Seder, or the Mashpiyim will give us maybe off the night Seder. And to me, it's like, okay, I feel like the Anhala in that Yeshiva might not fully understand what it means to grow up in a world that these Bachim are growing up in, and that they should be making it more central.
Welcome to Homesick for Lubavitch, a podcast where we explore Lubavitch identity in the year 2024. My name is Bentzi, and I will be your host. Let's begin. Okay, thank you very much. I'm here with Rabbi Elkanah Shmotkin, the Executive Director of GEM. Most of the people listening to this podcast will know exactly what GEM is, what it stands for, Jewish Educational Media. I think a lot of people at least think they know a lot about GEM. They certainly have seen a lot from GEM, myself included, of course. So I think I want to start off with something less obvious, and that is your personal history and how you came into this. I also think I'd like to explore a little bit the thought process behind GEM as it evolved and as it, especially with your experience. I think a lot of us, especially my age and younger, take it for granted as part of the landscape. It's just there, it's part of, you grow up in Yeshiva and there are videos every Motzei Shabbos or whatever, or Fabringans throughout the year. We just take it for granted, and I'm sure it wasn't so simple. So I actually remember you from quite a while ago. I was in Parksville in Tufshin Nun Hay, 1995. I was even on your color war team, the losing color war team, I have to add. I think it was Achrayas, was it? I don't know if you remember. Levi Wolf won. Anyway, shout out to Levi Wolf. But so I remember that. Of course, I was much, much younger, but my guess is that was before your days in GEM. And that was a very different time in Lubavitch, of course. And so I think I'd like to start the story from around then. Where were you at? What was your Bacher Shayaran like? And what were the formative years before you got into GEM?
Okay, there's a lot in there. I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My parents are Shluchim there. They're sent by the Rebbe in the late 1960s, I believe, to Milwaukee. That's where I grew up at 10 years old. So I learned in Lubavitch Nursery School, then Hill Academy, which was a community day school. Half-day Jewish studies, half-day secular studies, mixed till I was 10 years old. At that point, I went away to Cheder in Detroit, and then went through, I think, many of the locations that most Lubavitcher graduates would recognize. Brunois, Morristown. I was on Shluchim in Petersburg, in Russia, for 1 year. We like to say we were such a good kvutza that it was one and out. We were such a good kvutza, they never needed another kvutza after us in Petersburg. But that was actually a really important year, I think, in Petersburg, which is why I'm mentioning it.
Which year was that?
That would be Tufshin Nun Gimel.
Tufshin Nun Gimel.
This is the year between 1992, when the Rebbe had the first stroke, Chav Zayin Adar, and 1994, Gimel Tam was the Rebbe's passing.
So where were you during Chav Zayin Adar?
I was in Morristown. Shir Bays, if I recall correctly. Now I remember getting the news that night, hearing the Rebbe fell, and having that same type of, what does that mean, the Rebbe fell, and just finding the first ride going to New York, and life was forever changed after that. And then eventually, about a year later, going to St. Petersburg on Shluchim, and then second Chav Zayin Adar, when the Rebbe had the second stroke, just getting on a plane, coming back, taking a train to Finland, to Helsinki, because it was, if I recall correctly, it was a Thursday, and I wanted to get to New York before Shabbos, and taking a train to Helsinki, flying to New York, going straight before Shabbos to the hospital. And that was it with Peterburg for me.
The second Chavzayin Adar was Tafshin on Gimel?
I believe it was Tafshin on Dalet, 2 years later.
So you were in Peterburg for 2 years?
No, I went to Peterburg. It would have been at the beginning of Tafshin Nun Dalet.
I see. Okay.
I guess, or the end of Nun Gimel.
I see. Yeah, I mean that's obviously a very pivotal time in Lubavitch history. Probably under discussed, if you ask me. I'm not sure I want this particular podcast to be about that. I'm not sure that's what you signed up for either. But bringing it back to the topic that we will be talking about, I wonder if you could talk about what was the role of video at that time? What place did it have in the collective Lubavitch imagination?
Video of the Rebbe?
Yeah, video of the Rebbe. Video of the Rebbe, yes.
I think it was very minimal.
Mm-hmm.
There was WLCC. Well, first of all, there was GEM. GEM, at that time, was an organization that had been broadcasting the Rebbe's Farbrengens live via satellite. That was about live broadcast.
Right.
GEM also had VHS copies of those Farbrengens available, but they were minimal. There was WLCC, which was much more kind of consumer level, not high level production, but there was Ktoim, there was Pninim, which were selected selected highlights of videos of the Rebbe, that there was a relatively small segment of Lubavitch would buy them, watch them, have their children watch them. But because the Rebbe was continuously producing new material, and there's always something new coming out of 770, there's always the news of this Shabbos, of this week, I think that I know that the role of video was far, far less central, obviously, than it is now. Or if somebody went by the Rebbe for dollars, they could go into WLCC and find that video of their exchange with the Rebbe. But it was kind of ancillary compared to the living, breathing relationship with the Rebbe. And what did the Rebbe say this week? And what's the newest thing? And what's the newest answer? So it was there, and thank God it was there, because that's why we have those recordings. But it wasn't central to our relationship with the Rebbe as it is now.
Yeah, I mean, it's the reason I ask. It's not surprising to me that it had less of a role back then than it does now. But you wonder, living in the late Mems, let's say, or the early Nun, certainly after Chavzayin Adar. But even the late Mems, like those long weekday Farbrengens had ended. I don't remember when the last Farbrengen of Purim, let's say, was, but it didn't go all the way to the end, right? It was only Shabbos Farbrengens. So you wonder if people saw the value in video then as they did now. And you're saying that they were so engrossed in the present, or so maybe even overwhelmed with kind of the incoming that was happening in the present, that the videos of the past just didn't have the same value or same purchase as it would now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, even after Gimel Tammuz, it took quite a while for everybody to catch on and to recognize, certainly the older people, to recognize that this is a bona fide method of learning from, being inspired by, and connecting with the Rebbe. I think it actually continues to pick up speed to this day.
Really?
But certainly in the early days after Gimel Tammuz, it's not like everybody was like, let's go to the videotape, instantly. It took a little while. There were those who, had a quicker and deeper understanding. People were bewildered. What happens now? Where are we going? How's this going to continue? When Mashiach's got to be coming any second now, and it took a little while, I think, and that's normal as the circumstance was.
When did you realize?
To be honest, I think pretty early.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. It's hard for me to quote the dates, but as soon as I was able to get access to the videos. Disclaimer, I'm a second cousin of David Krinsky, who was the founder of GEM. So perhaps I was able to get access, more quickly or more directly than other people would have been, but still it was an issue. It was a collection of videos that were in boxes in his basement, or some of it was in 770, some of it was in his basement. And kind of this idea of, let's figure out what's going on, that this is a source of connection and inspiration, and we need to utilize this. I think it was pretty early. Like, I always had a thing for video.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I can't remember the year, but whether it's producing helping the staff in Gan Yisrael, Milwaukee, in the day camp to edit their end of camp video, the highlights for the last day of camp or whatever it was, or including videos of the Rebbe. I mean, I was only a teenager then, but helping out with Hanukkah Live, the live broadcast at the time, or whatever it was, I always had a thing for it.
Mm. But what it sounds like is that at the time, it was maybe difficult to access it, but that's mainly because people hadn't really paid attention to it. Like, it wasn't available to access. But it wasn't like there was a line clamoring for it. People didn't. It took effort to make it apparent to other people that there was value here.
Yeah, it took effort on the production side. The minute it was made available, people were able to see it and to recognize it. Uh-huh. And that's actually something that we often talk about with the team today. When we talk about an upcoming project or a switch to an existing project, and people are saying, well, nobody's asking for it, or if we ask people, they don't necessarily want it. I'm often in the position of saying, well, the reason they don't know they want it is because we haven't yet brought it to them. We haven't yet presented it, that we haven't yet brought the idea out to the public. So it's very normal. It's human nature. Whatever, the famous Henry Ford quote.
Right.
If you ask people what they want, they'll say they want faster horses.
Right. Yeah.
Lahavdil, but
people don't know what they want. People don't know what they want until they see it or until they have it.
So people, in this case, people want connection with the Rebbe. People want to continue to learn from the Rebbe. They want to be inspired by the Rebbe. If there are people who had seen the Rebbe already before, certainly in that case, they want to continue the connection. People who have not yet seen the Rebbe want to build that connection from scratch. There's sichos, there's mamarim, there are letters, there are speeches that your shliach makes in shul, there are things that your mashpia tells you to farbrengen. There are videos. Mm-hmm. Now, if those videos are forever locked up in a box, people might say, hey, that would be a nice thing, but until you show it to them and they experience it, that's when they begin to say, whoa, okay, this is something I want more of.
Was there any pushback, initial pushback or hesitation from, I don't know, if your colleagues or maybe older chassidim or, I don't know, anybody that felt like, maybe a Rebbe video is not the proper way, was there any kind of hesitation? I'm sure a lot of people that watch the Rebbe video like you described for the first time, that was maybe one of the first times they watched any video, I imagine, at the time. I mean, it's also hard to imagine, but in the 90s, which is when you started, the late 90s, mid to late 90s, I mean, video was still a relatively young thing, especially in Hasidic circles. So was there any pushback that this isn't the way to do it?
I can't think of any pushback per se. Mm-hmm. I can say that I perceive still in certain, I would say yeshivas in particular, let's say we get Israeli Bachrim coming over and we host them for Rosh Hashanah or the first days of Sukkot or something, and from the Israeli yeshivas, and I'll often ask them, is there a Seder in yeshiva where you guys are watching videos? And they're like, yeah, sometimes, some yeshivas out of Seder, or the mashpiyim will give us maybe off the night Seder to watch the beginning of a farbrengen and how many Bachrim are there. Some yeshivas say more, it's packed. Some say only half the Bachrim. And to me, it's like, okay, I feel like the Anhala in that yeshiva might not fully understand what it means to grow up in a world that these Bachrim are growing up in, and that they should be making it more central to the experience of being a Bachar. Not to, video of the Rebbe, that's on your own time. how central it is, that they only perceive a world where they already experienced the Rebbe. So a video is just maybe a replay of that, or it's just emphasizing what you learned in the Sefer, where I think it should be more central. But pushback per se, I can't think of any place where we really got it, like serious pushback.
Is it? I mean, you just said it's central to. It's more central than many people understand. Clearly, you put your money where your mouth is. That's what you're doing here. You believe that the video of the Rebbe is very, very central. How much of that is because today everything seems to be moving to video, and so much information in general, and maybe all information is consumed via video at this point. Is it because of that people see everything through video, so they need to see this through video too? Or is it that video would be important and would be central in any time of history if they had the opportunity? For example, do you think the Chassidim of the Frierdiker Rebbe who were in Russia, and left behind, or vice versa, would have, needed video the way that Bachram today need video?
Let's put aside need for a second, if
Okay.
I may. But the medium of video, first of all, I'm not saying that video is here to the exclusion of anything else. We need to be learning sichos and mamarim and really understanding the Rebbe's Torah and reading the Rebbe's letters and discussing and our connection with the Rebbe and what the Rebbe teaches us beyond video. If I think of how many hours a week I spend learning from a book versus watching a video, I learn Chassidus every morning. Probably spend more hours every week, not probably, definitely, than watching videos of the Rebbe as a Chassid, and that's perhaps as it should be. But if you think of what inspired, let's take, for example, a group of people, the early Shluchim, your grandfather, my father, the whole earlier generations, the first 100 Shluchim that went out, or 200 or 300 even. What inspired them to do what they did? Well, they learned at the Rebbe's feet. They obviously learned the Rebbe's sichos and mamarim. Some of them, the early ones, never even met the Rebbe in person, but for the most part, what so connected them and inspired them to go out and do these things that the Rebbe inspired them to do was the fact that they literally learned at the Rebbe's feet. They observed him, they heard from him, they experienced the Rebbe's emotions as he spoke about what he spoke about. Never mind, they were with him by davening and watched him walking in and out and everything else that the Rebbe did. And that had a huge impact on who they were, who they are. So the medium that can come closest to that is video. Obviously, there's the raw teachings, which is in all the Svarim. And like I said, those are important. Video is the closest to having the experience of learning directly. And in fact, that's what's so unique about this time in history. It's the first time in Jewish history, or in the history of the world, Jewish or not Jewish, that you can continue to learn from the tzaddik, the nasi, the Rebbe, directly from him, even after his passing. So imagine if we'd have a video of Moshe Rabbeinu or Rashi or the Baal Shem Tov or whomever it is. I think in any time people would take to that in a huge way. For whatever reason, Hashem set things up just so that the Rebbe is the first Jewish leader with whom that's possible. And thank God we do have so many recordings of him. So it's a much, in many ways, it's a much deeper and more meaningful way of learning from the Rebbe, because it's not only that you're feeling like as though you're learning directly from him, you really are learning directly from him as he's delivering it. The same way whoever made that hanacha of that sicha heard it and then wrote it down, well, you're hearing it, you're learning it directly from the Rebbe.
It's so interesting. Even just the analogy you just brought of Moshe Rabbeinu and the Rambam and these kind of figures. I don't know if I'm playing devil's advocate here, but I wonder if I saw Moshe Rabbeinu on a video camera, like some kind of recording, I wonder if I would be more impressed or less impressed. I don't know. I mean, in a way, almost like video gives the feeling that you see the person directly, but it is ultimately an illusion because, it's not the same thing as real life, obviously. And, like in a way, when you have to imagine the person that you don't see, it's this big thing that can't be put in a frame, right? I don't think there was a choice with Rebbe one way or another. There was video of him, so it wasn't like you could put the videos away and say, let's make believe like we're, but it's interesting. It's an interesting thing to think about. Because in a way, I guess what I'm saying is that what you mentioned earlier about how even when the Rebbe had stopped for bringing during the week, or even after Chazanah, when the Rebbe stopped for bringing at all, it wasn't like the video didn't yet seem like something that could kind of fill the void or, take over. Why? Because people were so engrossed in the present, right? You wonder if by getting over, when the video takes up too much space, does that come at the expense of the present? Does that come at the expense of the imagination? Like, are we getting lost in nostalgia? That I wonder if there's some risk there. Something that, I don't know if that's something you've thought about, you've considered.
So do you think that the video has taken an outsized role? Do you see people who are just their entire day is filled with watching videos of the Rebbe to exclusion of
no, I don't think so.
else?
No. So let me clarify. I'm not at all trying to put you on the spot that Jem is doing anything wrong. That's absolutely not my point. And like I said earlier, I consider myself a beneficiary of Jem, right? There's so many things that I saw, and like I said, I took for granted that I probably didn't even pay attention to how much I absorbed via things that took a lot of effort. Later on in life, I started making videos myself, and I realized how much work can go into something that looks very, very simple. And so, I don't minimize the effort, God forbid. And I think, it's obviously a net good. I just, as someone who makes video also, there's always a question in my head, like, you can get the video can fixate someone, right? And I wouldn't say that people are getting oversaturated with video. I think you're right. Like, you're going to find someone, is there one guy who watches too much video there? Okay, maybe. But as a rule, no, I don't think so. But I do think that sometimes people have a conception of the Rebbe that is overly 1990s, like overly nostalgic. They're maybe not watching too much of the video, but their idea of the Rebbe is, okay, I live in 2024. In my space, the Rebbe's passed away. It's kind of empty. If I go back via video to 1990 or to 1970, there I can connect to the Rebbe. So they're not being oversaturated with video. They're being maybe oversaturated with nostalgia. I don't think that's your fault. I don't think you have to defend yourself.
No, I don't feel defensive at all. I don't feel that you put me on the spot in any way. So there's two things there that I'd love to let's explore it together. One is my great hope, and in the way that we internally in GEM talk about the videos and think about them when we produce them, and even the wording and the translations and everything like that, we're very conscious to make sure to express, first of all, we're here to present it as it is and not to put any slant or spin on it, and that takes work. When we go through with our senior leaders, as we've been going through certain processes as a growing organization, what are the values we look for in our team? One of them is authenticity and humility, right, is another one, meaning to not put our own spin on things. And really, that's something that, when I go to the oil and we make sure to emphasize this to all of our people here, to make sure that we're not putting our own stamp or our own flavor or color or whatever you call it on what the Rebbe is saying, and make sure we're just a pass-through, which, as somebody who makes video, I'm sure you can attest that in itself could be a harder challenge than the opposite way. But
it's the hardest thing.
It's the hardest thing, yeah, to make sure that it's coming through. But the bottom line is you are producing it. You do have to make those choices of which clips are in and which aren't. And by virtue of doing that, you're making a choice.
Sure.
So you have to be willing, in fact, until you hit publish, to say, hey, maybe I got this wrong and I have to change it all up because I misunderstood what the Rebbe is really trying to say and I'm not just fixing. Anyway, that's a separate thing. But if watching the videos turns into an exercise in nostalgia, then we've done something wrong. Meaning the Rebbe is relevant and current, and his solutions for life are in the present. And if we're just watching videos to go back to some nostalgic thing, then I don't know if I would take the blame on us who's producing it. Again, hopefully we're not getting in the way and we're just giving you unfiltered what the Rebbe has to say. Then the viewer might be viewing it through the wrong lens. Because what the Rebbe is saying is the way God gave Torah at Sinai.
Right.
And the Rebbe considers himself a pass-through. And he's just bringing timeless truths, applying it to that day, but to our day as well. And hopefully the viewer can see that and understand that. There were 2 points.
Sure.
No, that was one. I'm trying to remember what the other one was, but I'm sure we'll come back to it. There
was another point? No, I think that was my point. It was addressing like do we get oversaturated with nostalgia? I think that is in a way if I would think like that is something that's unique to video, because if I have to imagine Moshe Rabbeinu, if I have to imagine the Rebbe, let's say, the act of imagining is what makes it present, right? Because I'm here and I have to imagine the Rebbe over there. That's what makes it present. Whereas a video is this kind of time capsule that gets delivered from the past. And, it's fascinating. Like in any documentary video making, the second that you have archival footage, and it could be the most random archival footage that like on its own is like, what's the big deal here? The grandfather's playing with the kid, with the toy car, like who cares? But the fact that it's archival transports you to this other space that people just seem to love, right? And so like the video is in that time, it brings you back there. That's to me the risk. But at the same time, I mean, obviously, I'm not suggesting there shouldn't be video. I don't know. I'm not suggesting anything really, but I'm probing a little bit. Like what the video, the video has to be there. The video is there. It's going to be used. People are going to want to see it, and there's definitely value in it. But is there a risk, and how is that risk mitigated? That's what I missed.
There are risks in everything. Yeah. The other point, which is, why do we need a Rebbe in the first place? Mm-hmm. What did God set up this whole concept of giving the Jewish people a leader who's an intermediary, somebody to look up to, somebody who teaches us? Rebbe means teacher. What did Hashem create the entire existence of a Rebbe for in the first place? And that is, one of the parts of it is that you're talking about a person of flesh and blood who is closer to Hashem than we are, who is smarter than we are, who understands Torah and is a holier person than us, but who we can relate to as a human being. Otherwise, just relate to Hashem.
Right.
What do you need a Rebbe for? The Rebbe as a human being, as an individual who is not just words on a paper, but who has a life and who walks and talks amongst the rest of us, or did so physically until 1994, and from whom we can learn and whom we can try to emulate. That is what a Rebbe is. So the difference between the Rebbe as words on a paper, that I can read and learn and understand and hopefully connect with, versus the Rebbe as a human being, is a huge difference. That, in fact, is the role of the Rebbe. So videos play a part in that. Photos play a part in that. I would say stories of the Rebbe play a huge part in that. This whole idea of stories, that was that was a whole big area that Jem took a big role in developing. And in the beginning, people were like, I would say most people, like, what in the world are you doing? There was pushback.
My encounters.
My encounter with the Rebbe.
There was pushback.
Lots of pushback. Like, what are you doing? You guys used to be pure. You just pushed out videos of the Rebbe or audio of the Rebbe. What are you starting with people's stories? That's a whole world on its own. And we didn't even realize at the time how powerful stories are. We just were doing it because, what I was saying was, look, there's a group of people who are devoted to publishing the Rebbe's teachings. There's a group of people who are publishing the letters and the sichos, And we're in the midst of a massive project to gather, restore, and preserve the audio and the video and the photos, and ultimately to publish them all in full-length format. But the way that the Rebbe impacted the world, so much of it was through one-on-one interactions, which people were taking to the grave with them. Right. It was just in people's hearts and minds. And so we started that just as a recording project. Then after a few years, we said, hey, let's start putting some of these into Living Torah and then the films. But many people, those like, what are you doing? People have, say stupid things and their memory's bad. And then people don't like other people's stories and whatever. That, thank God, I think that's behind us because people see the value of it. But my point is, in many ways, people are inspired by the Rebbe's teachings and connect with the Rebbe much more through the stories, which are not even in the Rebbe's own voice, than through many of the sichos and the letters. And again, I'm not saying that that's a medium of connection and that should be used to the exclusion of the others. I'm saying there are many of them, and each one plays a role in the human experience. Video, I can tell you many stories. One that comes to mind is it was actually a few weeks after Gimel Tammuz. There was a dinner, or actually it was a concert in Milwaukee, a fundraising concert that my father used to do every year, Lubavitch of Wisconsin. And it was literally, I think it was in Shiver, it was in Shluchim. I remember that we left during the singing part of it. And my father asked, I guess it was right after Gimel Tammuz, and I was involved in that. I'm remembering now in finding that clip of the Rebbe talking about Jewish unity. Beautiful sikha from Chafav Tavshem and Beis. The Rebbe talks about how we're two parts, it's like a hand and another hand in the same body. It's a beautiful sikha about Jewish unity. And this donor, like a really close balabas of ours, who since passed away, said to my father, wow, what the Rebbe said about Jewish unity was so powerful. And my father's like, I've been telling you this for whatever it was at the time, 25 years. He's like, no, the Rebbe really meant it. It was just, now, my father told him over this sikha, I'm sure, many times, and spoke to him about the concept of how Chabad looks at Jewish unity, but the experience of hearing it directly from the Rebbe was entirely different. There's a similar story with Rabbi Shem Tov, Avraham Shem Tov in camp, that a kid came to his father and said, we heard about Mashiach. The Rebbe came to camp and he spoke about Mashiach, and wow, it was so amazing. The father was like, I told him about Mashiach so many times. He said the same thing, I believe, the same words. The Rebbe really meant it. The experience of hearing and learning directly from the Rebbe is incredible. And if you talk about our own children, by the way, there's the idea of having videos and watching videos, but think of the experience of a child having that satisfaction and that connection. I learned directly from the Rebbe, not something in a sefer that my teacher taught me the meaning of these words, or even words that the Rebbe said. I was able to understand something in a rally that the Rebbe said to children directly to me. So that's something very special.
I want to unpack a little bit that word directly. So do you mean by directly that it's, because it's still through a screen, right? So what do you mean that it's, that like the person watching is convinced that there's nothing in between him and the Rebbe, like the Rebbe's talking, I don't have any reason to believe that it's manipulated digitally. And so, like, what's the difference if the Rebbe talking on a video directly or audio directly?
Video is just engaging more of your senses. Okay, we're human beings, so when we're more engaged, it has more meaning to us.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Because I think a little bit what I'm asking is a little bit from personal experience. I was born before Gimel Tammuz, but I lived on the other side of the world, and I was 6 when they passed away. So I never went to Fabring, and I certainly never was old enough to understand anything I was saying before. So like it, in a way, when I see the video, there's this kind of thing, there's this tension that I would experience where on one hand, like you said, it's directly, you're engaged with all your senses, but on the other hand, it's just a video. Yeah, I don't know. I
listen. I'm not saying that it's great, that it's good. God forbid that we're after Gimel Tammuz. These are the facts God gave us. This is the situation.
I understand. What I'm trying to get to is that it seems to me that like we are in a very new space. Obviously, we're in a very new space, and like what you've been talking about all this time is how video is a tool of connection, which I don't think is disputable, and why should one dispute it? But how does one manage that? How does one? I think I am going a little bit back to the oversaturated part. Do you think that the video can be the starting point of, for you, do you think the video can be the starting point of one's connection to the Rebbe today, around which one builds with the things that he learns and the stories that he hears and so on? Or does one have to start somewhere else and then bring video into that? Is that a fair question? Because I feel that would be the difference between you and me. Because you were already a bacher before Chazan. You had a starting point. The video is a tool in that. For me, and people, I guess, my age, sometimes the video feels like the starting point. And in that sense, I feel like sometimes, especially as I get older, it begins to feel like I don't want to live in the past. And so, is that a fair question, in your view?
Let's put one thing down. People have to have healthy relationships with the Rebbe. Mm-hmm. If it's possible to have an unhealthy relationship with the Rebbe, absolutely.
Right.
There are many people, or some people who I think do have unhealthy relationships with the Rebbe. They don't understand how to balance, how to relate to the Rebbe as a human being, and to understand who the Rebbe is. There's a lot of that, or maybe not so much of it, but many people who have, each person has their experience and their journey, and they need to get to a place where their relationship with the Rebbe is healthy, and they've nurtured it, and they know how to relate to the Rebbe in a healthy way. For some people, the starting point could be a story. Mm-hmm. In fact, the Rebbe writes in the letter, very famous letter, very important letter, I should say, to Rebbe Shlomo Chaim Kesselman on Chamishasar B'Shvat Tafshin Tes, which is a year before the previous Rebbe's passing, about hiskashrus. And he says how you introduce new people to the Rebbe who might not be connected or might not know that they're connected before. And then he said, I believe, if I recall correctly, the starting point there is to start with a story. And then
a story of the Rebbe.
A story of the Rebbe, if I recall correctly. And then a teaching, and then if they need a bracha, help them write in, and then they become, and then they give money to Maimed. It was what the Rebbe was writing about at the time. For some people, the starting point is going to be coming across a video of the Rebbe on YouTube.
Right.
And it's not only that it's going to be, this has happened. For some people, it's going to be picking up a here's my story. For many people, it's going to be hearing from their shliach, how they were inspired by the Rebbe or a personal experience with the Rebbe. The endpoints could be one of many, and I don't know if there's any one that's right or wrong.
Right.
I think it's a different question of if there are people who are off balance or have a funny perception or not a complete or clear perception of the relationship between the Rebbe and Chassid, the Rebbe and member of Klal Yisrael. That's a different question, I think. I don't know if that has to do with video per se.
No, I'm understanding my own question better now.
I think I might have to make a correction. I'm very embarrassed to say I simply don't remember what year Chav Zayin Adar the second time happened. It might have been Nun Gimel. Anyway,
I always answer Nun Dalet, like you said.
So it is Nun Dalet.
But
okay, fine.
No, I wasn't there. I mean, I was 3 years old, but that's.
I think it's Nun Dalet, but I don't know why it just hit me. I might have gotten it wrong. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. No, I'm understanding my question better as you're answering my not very well formulated question. I suppose what it is, the nub of it to me is that in many ways, and I think this may have changed, and you'll tell me what you think about this proposition. I think in the years right after Gimel Tammuz, and I kind of started surfacing, like in terms of understanding a little bit what was going on, probably around 10 years after Gimel Tammuz. And before that, around then, it seemed that there was a lot of effort to kind of fill the void, like how do we replace what we lost, kind of thing. And I feel like that's where I worry about video kind of getting distorted, because I guess what I've been pushing a few times or pushing at in this conversation, is that I feel like there are limitations to video, which is which you acknowledge, obviously, right? But as time has evolved, it would seem to me that people are now thinking of, it's not about trying to get back to the past, right? It's like there's a whole new generation of kids that are being born, growing up now that, it's not like a bridge anymore to the past. How do we live in the present, right? And if we're going to be honest, brutally honest, like we have to live with the reality that we're in. And so then, the video is not just a bridge to something else, it is its own thing. And, I don't think anybody would argue that, like, there could be a digital Rebbe, right? Like, I remember someone even, like, kind of saying once to me, and I don't know how serious he was about it and how much he had thought about it, but it was at the time when all the rage was in the, what are they called, those projections on the screen. You know what I'm talking about, where
3D,
where like someone appears on the screen as if they're there, and it's all composed digitally. And like he's like, wouldn't it be cool if they like created a Fabrain where they like programmed?
We get these all the time. People come to us with that. I know somebody. This person wants to do it. I want to do it. What do you think?
Right, exactly, right. And that's where I feel like there's a very interesting question about, a digital Rebbe is not what a Rebbe is, right? And why not? Because I feel that like you're saying earlier, a Rebbe is all about the flesh and blood. It's all about the real life relationship, the real life story, the real life presence, with all the complications and everything that comes with that. And digital is pretty much the opposite of that. It's a compelling but very false copy of that. And that's what I'm probing at now, right? And
first of all, are you referring to hologram?
Hologram,
yeah,
correct.
So we get this all the time. We've been getting it for years.
Make a Rebbe hologram.
Yeah, and the first response is we have to be legitimate and genuine and authentic. And the second thought is, okay, look, we've done many things already, which maybe in the days after Gimel Tammuz we would not have done, but technology is going there, and we have to make sure it's done responsibly. And does this fit into something that we consider responsible and not creating something, from scratch that's inappropriate? And we're always asking those questions with whatever technology is. To have a 30-second TikTok video of the Rebbe saying a little soundbite, I'm guessing that any chassid who would see that on Dalet Tammuz, you chopped a 30-second, and for good reason. But things evolve, technology evolve. The viewing habits and the sophistication of the viewer has changed,
right?
Such that they understand that this is 30 seconds out of what might have been something much, whatever it is. Things evolve and they change, and we have to always have that balance of being authentic, but using the medium in a way that people connect to it, etc. There's a beautiful shalah that I learned last week. It's in a sikha from last week's parsha. It's beautiful, and if you read the shalah, it looks like it's taken out of a new age chumash, that if I would read it or see it as a meme, I would say, okay, some guy wrote that up, because it's like so emotional or whatever.
Could do that. New age isn't so new.
The shalah writes, the Friedrich Rebbe brings it, and the Rebbe quotes it in the sikha, Zekeli vanveu, when Hashem is my God, and I, extol him, glorify him, then it's vanvehu, anivahu, in one word. When I truly understand Hashem, when I connect with him emotionally, and I do my best to really get a grasp on Hashem, then vanvehu, it's anivahu, it's a personal relationship to the extent that we're in one word, vanvehu. Elekei avi, when it's bekabbalas oil, I have emunah, and I need to have emunah, and all that, and emunah is a great thing, then varei mimenu, I hold him high. I'm trying to remember the word. I exalt him, right? So he's distant from me. And there's actually, if I can grab this right here.
Just watch it with your headphones.
Yeah. It's too good. It's too good not to read it for you, because the Rebbe actually translates it to Yiddish, if I may.
You won't be the first one.
what? To give you some Yiddish here?
No, to pull out a Likutei Sichos.
Oh, no, but it's really, really beautiful. Das heißt, as in Zugov to Emunah, in addition to Emunah, which is, Avi, passed down from my parents, darf euch sein Hayidia, weil durch Emunah is der Hergisch von einem Menschen in einem Leben wie der Rebbe Ram Veniskov. Through Emunah, Hashem is distant to a degree von Menschen. Und der Mensch ist meruchak me'itay b'matzpun alev. Matzpun is conscience in modern Hebrew, but it basically emotionally distant.
Right.
But when I create a Yediyah mitzad ha'asaga verstehen umasig sein alikus, when I really understand and comprehend the likus to the extent that I can, vertemot ani v'hu dvukim biyachad. And it's a very beautiful shalah that Rebbe brings it. But anyway, translating this to our relation, this is talking about God.
So do you see yourself, I know you mentioned the TikTok, the 30 seconds, and like that to me is a lot more about format and has a lot more to do with how FUTs are reaching the world out there. Do you yourself personally, or within the Lubavitch context internally, do you see a shift in the mission of GEM over the past 30 years? I mean, it doesn't have to be exactly as I described. Maybe it could be completely different. But, I mean, first of all, do you agree that something has shifted in that way? From trying to hold on to the past, kind of like stop time from moving, to trying to figure out how to live in the present? And if you do at all agree with that, has that affected the way you see your work?
I don't think there's been a shift in the mission. I think there's been a shift in the output, and it's going to continue to shift. And we have aspirations that are way beyond, what we're doing today. And as we have the means and the capacity to achieve them, we're going to keep evolving. And also the world continues to change. So what we do needs to evolve as well. I don't think the mission has changed. I have to close my eyes and think back to what my state of mind was when I first got involved. But I don't think so. In other words, there was a huge mission to start with, and there's a lot to do. And as we achieved certain things, we kept and we keep moving forward. We're going to keep doing that, God willing. But I don't think the mission changed. I don't know that at the beginning it was about grabbing on. Maybe it was to an extent. I'm trying to I should probably take 3 days to think about frame of mind then, or even look up old emails and documents about what the goal of this project or that project is. But I don't think so. I mean, I can remember, for example, I think when we started Living Torah, we had 5 bullet points of what we're trying to achieve. There's a ton of stuff in the archive. We want a platform to give it out because we didn't have a format or how to do it. It was before the internet was a thing where you just dump stuff on the internet. And one of them was we want people to get a drip, weekly dose of the Rebbe to be able to begin thinking like the Rebbe. So that's very current and today and forward-facing rather than nostalgic. I don't think nostalgia for me was ever a motivation. Listen, there was always, you mentioned Gan Yisrael in New York. I think it was that first year, maybe the second year, that I had already gotten from ABC News the clip of Menachem Begin coming to the Rebbe. Okay, so that's seeing a beautiful old clip, and I can't claim that was about motivating the children, the campers going forward. It's just like, oh, look at this really neat, cool, fun, interesting thing. The Prime Minister's visiting the Rebbe, and we got it from the news, and there's a news anchor talking about it. But I don't think, to the best of my recollection, I don't think we've ever been about nostalgia. And by the way, that's a challenge because, if you watch Living Torah every week, there's a lot of old footage in it. And, sometimes we have these conversations, or I just this morning was writing an email about some other video that we're working on, not Living Torah. And we were talking about how do we do a certain scene or bring out a certain audio sicha. And I was saying it's a challenge. Let's do it in some fresh way. But we need to be clear. The challenge is not to make it feel like nostalgia. But the Rebbe delivered the Sikha 50 years ago, and all the pictures are going to be old. But still, I want to at least do our best to make sure it doesn't feel like we're just taking you back to something that happened 1,000 years ago. That is a challenge. But I think, in fact, I always do my best to articulate here and to remind everybody. And I think it's not many of the staff, many of the team are very good with it, to do our best not to make it into nostalgia, but into something that speaks to today.
So interesting. It's
while being authentic to what actually happened.
I mean, that's such. I don't know if people listening to this who don't do this for a living can understand that challenge. I'm not even sure that I fully comprehend the challenge.
By the way, I'm not saying we do phenomenal
It's
with
not the point.
It's a challenge that we're conscious of. It's not always easy. Like, what do you do? It's an old picture that it's an old video.
To me, that's not the point, even if you succeed or not. The fact that you're willing to take on that kind of challenge, because it's the tension between the form and the content, right? The form of video basically takes you back to 1970. Like, that's just what it is. It's a video camera pointed at a space and time, and it's very obvious usually where it's from and when it's from. And you're trying to focus on the content of, like, the message of the Rebbe, right? But you don't want to separate it. That's the whole point. The whole point is you don't want to separate the two. You don't want some modern thing of taking the content and, like, repurposing it. You want it to come in the form, but that form is, it's a fascinating challenge.
I don't want my 16-year-old daughter or any high school girl or anybody to be watching and saying, "Oh, that's whatever. That's the old stuff." And okay, now we're about to see the footage of the black and white footage of cars driving through Times Square because that's when the story happened, which is the easiest go-to when you're retelling an old story or even playing an old sikha from that era.
I mean, I think in a way, to me, it's beginning to kind of pieces are beginning to fit together here. Like, in a way, it seems to me that your shift, or you didn't shift the whole thing. You're bringing in storytelling of people telling stories, even against, other people's hesitation of, like, how do you kind of bring stories that are, the Rebbe placed a premium on a story coming from a Rebbe, not from elsewhere. Like, how do you bring these stories into the canon, so to speak? That is what makes it current in a way, right? Because you, like, if you watch a film, let's say, where there's archival footage, but that archival footage is linked to footage of today, you have a foothold in the present, right? Whereas if you just have archival footage, it's like, I don't have anything to hold on to unless I'm transported back in time. And I think that, I'm beginning to understand a little bit the pieces that you're moving around here better. And I'm also,
The problem is that the stories are also nostalgia in a way. I just want to tell you,
it's a step in the right direction.
From a filmmaking perspective, the stories make it harder with the nostalgia, as I see it, rather than easier, because the Rebbe is clean. He's saying a message, and you can say, put that with modern footage. That's fine, because you can just translate it into something today.
Interesting.
When you have somebody telling a story, watch Living Torah any week, and it's an ongoing conversation within GEM. How do you do this? Usually, they'll be telling a story from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever it is. It's at a very set time and space. The message that the Rebbe is saying is usually timeless. The Rebbe is teaching us something. You can take that and put it to modern footage. That's a different whole challenge of how do you put it to modern footage and not come across as tacky or whatever, or as too, on the nose. Okay, now they're trying to literally tell me, what I should do, whatever. Anyway, it's all an interesting challenge.
I obviously everything has its limitation. I guess my point was that when you watch a video of someone that was recorded recently who's talking years later and remembering back, okay, at least there's a person here who lives now, and that connects me to the story back. Not necessarily is it your job to make that final link for everybody watching it either. Maybe it's on them to figure out how they connect to it, but like, what is the answer to not having a digital Rebbe? Well, the answer is that you have
a living Rebbe.
Exactly, that's the answer, right? It's not that, like, to stop watching a video, right? The answer is that you have a living Rebbe. You figure out where you connect in a real way, and then you bring the other things into that kind of ecosystem. But I think I probably belabored the point a little bit. To me, it's a very very important subject. Something that I've wrestled with a lot. I don't know if people older than me could understand what I'm talking about, but I think it's important. let's let's go back to your story. Let's go back to your story. You have this idea of Gem. You unearth these videos. We already talked about getting access to them, then coming up with Living Torah, which has been going on for how many years now?
Living Torah, easiest way to remember is as we were mastering the first video, we watched the Twin Towers fall out our window. So September.
So almost 25 years. Yeah. Almost 25 years.
Every single week.
Did you? I put out a podcast for 20 weeks and I've already taken a break. It's exhausting.
Oh, you did this weekly?
I did it for 20 weeks weekly. I took a break.
Good for you. Yeah,
it's exhausting. So 25 years is a whole different thing. Did you at the beginning see, nobody thinks 25 years ahead, but did you realize that this was something that could really explode the way it did?
First of all, when I got involved, it wasn't about Living Torah per se. I got involved 5 years before that.
No, I know, but I'm talking about Living Torah specifically.
Yeah, I think it needs to be a lot bigger. I really see the Rebbe as the Nasi of every single Jew. And I'm actually quite frustrated, to be honest, that we don't have a wider viewership. And I don't put that on the people out there. I put that on me and on us. But
you're saying outside Lubavitch, within Lubavitch?
Every Jew. Every Rebbe of every Jew. You get up in a room, you go somewhere in New York, and you say the words of the Lubavitch Rebbe. How many people will come over to you and say, I got $1. My grandmother didn't have any children. This happened, that happened. Those are people that had a direct connection to the Rebbe and who, physically had some interaction or someone in their family did. But the world is thirsty for leadership, for real, godliness. The Rebbe gives that. The Rebbe is authentic Yiddishkeit 101. And I believe that the Rebbe is the Nasi of every Jew.
When did you realize that with just video, you could reach someone that didn't have any other starting point? Because if you're putting it on yourself, right, you make videos. You're not out in the field. And you're saying that you have to reach all these people that haven't been reached yet. Clearly, you think that video can do that. When did you realize, and how did you realize that video on its own could be that kind of connection?
Hard for me to say an exact date and time, but...
Was there a story that stands out where someone sends you a message and you're like, oh my goodness?
Nothing I can point my finger to in particular. The fact that I guess when I started, YouTube wasn't a thing or whatever, but I still, even then, realized that videos of the Rebbe can and should be consumed far wider audience than they were at the time. And I still think they could be. And it's on us in that I think we need to exude excitement to Shluchim, to Anash, to those who would be the ones to be proud and comfortable to share it forward, rather than it being a very, Lubavitcher experience. And that's been happening slowly but surely. And especially now in the situation with Israel, which is an area I'd love to get into when we have a chance.
No, let's get into it.
But so it's a problem. It might be a self-esteem issue or whatever, that I always blame it back on us or on me. But I think that if we would successfully, there's two things. There's producing it in a way that it's interesting to everybody, spoon-feeding it in a way that's meaningful and relevant to everyone, and not assuming that the entire potential audience is one and the same. Like I've said, we can do a whole gem at our current size of over 40 people full-time, etc., just for non-Jews. It's just about taking the same material and producing it with the audience in mind, especially the Gem Farbrengens, as they're called, the broadcast Farbrengens. Ever spoke a lot, every single one, almost, I think, without exception, on the broadcast Farbrengens ever spoke for non-Jews. At least a sicha, right? But it needs to be curated for them. Right. Same material, but just, with that audience in mind. Not lahavdil, coming back to Jewish people. We're doing more and more.
But would you be as concerned with non-Jewish people to hold on to the form of, this is a video of the Rebbe as opposed to just the message? Because it seems like with Lubavitchers, it's very, very important that they hear from the Rebbe, that they see the Rebbe. Right?
That is our mission. There are many people out there who have big platforms, a YouTube rabbi, and there are many Lubavitchers who do great on social media and have very huge followings, and they do that, and that's phenomenal. Our unique niche is the Rebbe himself. And we believe deeply, as I was telling you before, about the value of learning from the Rebbe himself. And like very often people bring us projects or ideas, and why don't you do this? And they're great ideas, but early on, maybe I went down some of those rabbit holes, but that's what we're unique with, and that's what we believe in. That's what we get up for every morning. So we usually don't go too far.
So that's a core mission.
And on the other hand, we do some projects outside of video if we feel that they are bringing the Rebbe to an audience in a way that we can uniquely. So we're not locked exclusively to video, although video is our main, video, audio, photos. But we've gone, Early Years is a great example, and there are other books that we've been involved in. And frankly, we get involved in many of other people's projects or other organizations' projects where we feel we can help, even if it's not going to result in anything with a GEM logo, with a GEM, as a GEM product. But if we feel that this is going to help, even if it's outside video.
Because it's so interesting. I mean, that to me, I didn't even think of asking that before I came here, but it's so interesting because that is another place where you see the tension between the form and the content, right? Because if your mission was to get the Rebbe's message to as many people as possible, you would say, okay, in this case, maybe them hearing it from a rabbi with a white beard in Yiddish, which the language is probably the hardest kind of divider, because a lot of people don't want to watch things with subtitles, right? Then right away they kind of say it's not for me because I don't understand it. That's my guess. You would say, okay, our goal is to hit as many people as possible. We have to change it. But you're not ready to give, that isn't your goal, right? Your goal is to get as many people as possible in the original form. I mean, that's fascinating. Are there any, is there any other similar kind of organization in the world that has that kind of dedication or adherence that it's, because there are some places where they don't care about getting the message out. They're kind of like these old school museums that make it as hard as possible to get access to the message. They're very into authenticity, and we're all they're in their own world of holding the pure message. And then on the flip side, there are many people who are proselytizing, but at any means available. Are there any people that and any is there any a model out there or is it completely unique?
Has there ever been an individual like the Rebbe?
Well,
anyway, I don't know about other.
I'm not asking you to justify it. I'm just saying, I'm thinking about it's very unique. I think it's very unique. So you don't know.
I can't think. I don't know of others. Listen, there are various presidential libraries that I see that put out footage of their subject on video,
But their goal isn't so much to get the name out there. I mean, I've worked with them.
Our goal isn't to get the name out there either. It's to get the
message out there. Yeah, I'm saying that their goal isn't. They're not waking up in the morning to do that.
No, and by the way, one of the interesting things is, especially going again with this Israel thing. It's an interesting thing. There are certain videos that we put out that became huge in Israel during the war at certain pivotal points where the Rebbe said some message. On our YouTube channel of, 3,000-4,000 hits. But we know that it's been ripped and put into a whole bunch of Telegram channels, quoted by people in the Prime Minister's office, by military experts on TV. It's made a huge difference, a couple specific clips, but there's no way that it was. So there's two ways you can look at it. You can say, hey, you ripped, our clip. Let's get it down from wherever we can, right. IP violation, or versus, look, the Rebbe's message is getting out. And that is an issue because you do have to keep an eye on that and, kind of keep mowing the lawn to make sure it doesn't get out of control. But in certain situations especially, you say, great, the Rebbe's message is getting out, and even better in his own voice because it's so much more impactful.
So, but that's then again it comes up. It seems like you are very focused. And I know you want to talk about Israel, and I think I'm also interested to hear about it. When it comes to Israel, it seems again that you are very interested that people hear the Rebbe's message in his voice, even if there's a way to you could make the message reach further, not in his voice. Is that because of just, fidelity to the Rebbe's voice is not something we're going to negotiate, or is it because you believe that that is the only way to...
So in the Israel thing in particular, we're actually doing quite a bit not in the Rebbe's voice.
Okay.
Believe it or not. So let me tell you what's been going on with Israel. So I was at the oil on Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah with my family. And as the news started trickling in of what was happening, first of all, it was interesting that there were 36 hours approximately from when we started hearing about it,
right,
until the end of Yom Tov. So I actually had the chance to think. But it was, like everybody, it was very jarring and all that. And before long, there was a trickle of young men that started coming through, non-observant young men coming through to the oil test for the Rebbe's bracha on the way to JFK as they were getting called up to go to
wow,
on Yom Tov still.
Right.
So that was, an experience. But a couple things. So first of all, my first thought was, for many years I've been making videos of the Rebbe on Israel, and I've been researching it, and it's always been an area of interest and fascination. But that now people are finally going to be able to hear. There was something about the tone that the Rebbe uses in many of those sichos that made it very difficult to publicize in a way that people don't say, like, he's yelling.
Why is he so upset?
Yelling? Is he angry? Like, what's going on? You turn on one of those sichos now, any one of them, people are like, oh, yeah. The Rebbe's talking zum Zach, and people can hear it. I'm saying
Which sichos are you referring to? The sichos
about
the
Israel
wars?
Security.
Okay.
Where the Rebbe's warning Israel that they're making mistakes, or certain decision makers in Israel, that they're making mistakes and it's going to have catastrophic results.
Right.
Put that aside for a minute. A short time after Simchas Torah, I gathered a group of young, smart Shluchim who I know are into the Rebbe's talks on Israel security, and created a think tank of sorts, is the way I like to call it in retrospect. And I said to them, please don't send me another link to a video or a audio clip of the Rebbe screaming, Afshal, don't give away another inch. I know in general what the Rebbe says. I'm overwhelmed with information. I'm saying I, but I'm speaking figurative. That is what I said, but I was trying to speak on behalf of whoever the potential viewer is. And I want to understand in a deeper way what the fundamentals are of the Rebbe's approach to Israel's security. Mm-hmm. What the pillars are. Why shouldn't I give away Afshal? In other words, if you speak to many people in the right wing in Israel or outside of Israel, whether it's Smotrich or Ben Gvir or Ben Shapiro here in the United States, or another 1,000 people, what they're saying today is very similar to what the Rebbe says. And maybe even for some of them, they've always said things that are very similar to what the Rebbe says. But what the Rebbe is saying is unique, and there's something about it that the others are not saying. Proof being, there were many people on the right wing who said things similar to the Rebbe through the years, and those are the very people who made the gravest mistakes for which we're paying now and which we paid for on Simchas Torah. So it kind of condensed a PhD's worth of study into about 8 or 10 weeks. Basically, I personally dropped almost everything in GEM, to the chagrin of most of our team and whatever. And I really wanted to study this in a deeper way. And came up with an understanding, which is a roadmap for Israel's security, a national security plan for Israel. Beyond just don't give away land. When I say just, I mean beyond only those things, but it's more the deeper thinking. In the weeks after Simchas Torah, we got many, many calls, and it continues to this day, but now it's tapered off a little bit, where somebody would say, I'm going into a meeting with Bibi, or I'm going into a meeting with Gans. What does the Rebbe have to say about hostages? What does the Rebbe have to say about, we're laying siege to a city? How do we handle it? There are terrorists inside. What does the Rebbe say about hostages in tunnels, in a city that's in a siege, et cetera, et cetera. And each time we did our best to answer based on the information we have. But what I said to them each time was, let me try and teach you the fundamentals.
Sure.
And then you'll know what to do in every situation. And it really, really works that way.
Right.
And I think this also answers kind of an elephant in the room question about the Rebbe's approach to security, which is, if you have interviews with 200 military, security, political leaders, government leaders in Israel, talking about how amazing the Rebbe is and how the Rebbe was so brilliant with Israel's security, and they all waited in his waiting room at 2 o'clock in the morning and later told you about it so proudly on an interview, why, for the most part, didn't they listen? I mean, I'm generalizing now.
Right.
But how does that work? And the answer is, the Rebbe's perspective and the Rebbe's solutions are very, very fundamental. They go to the core of what Israel is, who we are, and how we need to approach our security. But once you understand those, you have a decision-making process, how to handle risk when it comes up, how to handle individual situations, how to communicate it outwards, how to talk with the UN, how to talk with the United States, 8 rules for how Israel should handle its relationship with its great partner, the United States, how to handle the Arab population in Israel, everything. But you have to first get the fundamentals. So it's not a short form thing. It's not a 30-second TikTok video. Now, there are many videos that are very popular and that are very meaningful in the moment. If the night before Blinken comes to Israel, we publish a video about the Rebbe guiding in Israel's Prime Minister or Secretary of State on how to handle their upcoming meeting with the American Secretary of State and President, and the Rebbe gives them some rules for how to handle the Americans, that's very, very relevant. Or many other things that we put out, individual clips, and we keep hearing, whoa, that's amazing, keep putting them out, and that's great. But right now, all of Israel, from the top to the bottom, from the right to the left, are looking for solutions. Even the people who are advocating very strongly to do this or to that, when you talk to them, people are confused, they're scared, there's no one speaking out with a clear, clean perspective on what we can do and why we should do it. We know, okay, don't give in, don't give them humanitarian aid, and it's true, and most of these things are correct. Right. But what do we do? What are we going to do in a year from now, 2 years from now? How are we going to prevent this from happening again? And why are you so sure that my way is going to work over your way?
Right.
There's a lot of that. And the good news is, everybody is ready to listen. When you walk into a room today, I'm talking about the decision makers at the top, the right wing, even the left wing, but certainly huge segments of Israeli society, journalists, the whole command of level of the IDF, and never mind the Datilu me world, who want to hear and know Torah's perspective and what the Rebbe has to say on any morning. There's a very willing audience. This is something that is beyond anything I've ever experienced since my involvement in GEM. So kind of what I chanced upon or stumbled upon doesn't let me sleep, and to say, oh, okay, let's just put out some videos. So I got into this mode of teaching. We've had hundreds of Shluchim on Zoom calls, because I think Shluchim are the teachers and the leaders of Klal Yisrael, and they're predisposed, they want to know what the Rebbe has to say. Right. So we've been doing a lot of that. If people line up meetings, with Israel's leadership, so, we go and do that. And my goal is to be involved with it for just another couple of months until the ball is rolling without me, to be able to turn the whole thing into a very basic talking point that any Lubavitcher bacher who's going to host a barbecue for Israeli soldiers can understand and know clearly what to say. Push out a couple of videos, got to get a book started, some articles, and then hopefully, can go back to regular programming.
I'm going to venture, I guess, that you're never going to go back to regular programming. It's probably chutzpahdik of me to say, but I don't know how you go back after that. Because what I would say is, from what you're telling me, is it's really fascinating. Because you made the comment of the fundamentals over kind of the direct answers, specific kind of, you do this for this, you do this for this situation, this hechi timsa, this exact hechi timsa. You go to the fundamentals. I remember hearing a story, I don't know if it's true, that the shliach once asked for eitzah of how to deal with certain things, and the Rebbe told him to learn a blat gemara every morning, and that already gave him the right frame of mind to answer the question appropriately. And what does the blat gemara have to do with which mechanic to use or whatever, or which property, or these kind of questions that the Gemara is not going to talk about. It's because you're going to the fundamentals of how to think. And like again, it seems to me like there's a tension here where people came to you with like, what are the answers? And you're telling them, wait a second, you need to understand the questions better. Right? I can't give you answers if we don't have a deeper conversation about the questions. And then you're talking about kind of developing a think tank model in GEM where there's,
but
right?
Listen, a lot of, sorry, go ahead.
No. I mean, that just seems
the
seems
output
like
is video as well. In other words, the Rebbe making those key points on video is part of. Listen, this isn't the first time we've done this. We have a series called Gem Presents, and it's very bare bones. It's me standing in front of a black or this scene
this
right
place,
over
right?
here.
I think
This is here.
I think I've
but
seen it.
It was never intended to. We weren't expecting and not even intending to get hundreds of thousands or millions of views. The goal was, let's educate Shluchim, Lubavitch, Anash as to this complex topic, what the Rebbe's thoughts are on it. We use a couple of videos of the Rebbe, but I think the more unique part is what I say in between, because we studied a topic and we're serving it to them on a silver platter, and that forever changed the perception or understanding of the Rebbe on anti-Semitism. We keep getting feedback about that. Chabad.org developed it into an article, a moment of silence. So it's a complex topic that the Rebbe talks about a lot. Let me tell you this. The Rebbe, as you know, the Rebbe had a unique approach to Rashi, Allah Torah, right? It was his own, the Rebbe invented it essentially, or rolled it out. There are 200 rules, klalim, for Rashi Allah Torah. The Rebbe never came out and said, here are my 200 rules for Rashi Allah Torah. There's 650 or whatever the number is, sichas on Rashi. Amongst them, the Rebbe has 200 rules. Somebody came, gathered those together, published them in a book.
Right.
The Rebbe was thrilled. But for whatever reason, the Rebbe didn't teach in that way.
That book was published before Gimel Tammuz.
Yes. And there are other, if you look...
Klali Rashi, you're
Klali
talking
Rashi.
about. Yeah.
There's, another thing that comes to mind is Mimaynei Yeshua, which goes through each of the Ushpizin, the nights. It was made by Vad Anachas Blahat. The Rebbe was thrilled with that sefer they took, and they essentially put together all of the Rebbe's sichos on this Ushpizin, on this night, and what the meaning of it is, and all that. And they made it into one unit. So they synthesized together the Rebbe's thinking on this thing. The Rebbe did not present it that way, but the Rebbe there are beautiful answers from the Rebbe about that sefer, etc. For whatever reason, that's not the way the Rebbe laid out his Torah. But the same thing, by the way, in the area of Israel's security. There's a sefer called Das Torah, which was made by Schomberg Volpe.
Right.
The Rebbe referred people to it. He took, and for that day, did an amazing job consolidating in real time the Rebbe's thoughts on Israel's security and made chapters out of it, etc.
The Sichos, the same thing.
The Sichos is in a smaller way, because usually they're focusing on an individual Sicha and they rewrote it. Sometimes it'll be 2 or 3 Sichos.
Right. But it's written in not necessarily the way the Rebbe delivered the Sicha, right?
Correct. So this is the same thing. Like if you hear our presentation on Israel's security, you probably won't hear any words that are new, but it's just an entirely different way of presenting it.
But it does seem fundamentally new in the sense that, at least in terms of GEM or in general, like Lubavitch, there was always a thing where if you have a question, I think someone sent it to me the other day, like back in the day, they didn't know what to do. They'd wait for them to talk at Fabring, and then they knew what to do, right? And the person coming to you today, asking you, like, what would the Rebbe say in this very specific case, has that same mindset. There has to be an answer somewhere out there that, like, I just don't know of, that gives me marching orders. And you're telling them that, no, like, you have to think deeper. A, because not necessarily is there always a specific answer to that case. And B, because if you don't understand the fundamentals, you're going to be another guy who hears an answer, but when push comes to shove, is going to fall under pressure, right? So isn't that a new thing for GEM or in general for Lubavitchers to start to say we can't just rely on answers, we have to learn how to think?
I hope it's not new. I hope people have been thinking. I've been taught to think.
Okay, so
opening an Igris, this might offend some of your audience, I don't know, but it's the difference in just opening an Igris random or using the maftech in the back of the Igris.
No, it's deeper than that. It's deeper than that. Okay, I know
let's
that.
not go down that
I know. I just
but-
understand. I'm understanding now that the way I said it may have come across condescending. I'm not, God forbid, saying that nobody was thinking the past 30 years. I'm certainly not saying that I'm the first person to think. That's not my point. And I hope it didn't come across that way. What I'm suggesting is, it sounds like even here, where you had a very strict kind of mandate that you gave yourself, it seems you said that like you changed course almost for the past 3 months for this scenario where you realized you had to go deeper, and you said it was mind opening. I find it hard to believe that you can put that genie back in the bottle. Like, doesn't that go not just for Israel and not just for me Yehudi, but what it means to be a chassid, what it means shalom bayis, and all these things? We have to go deeper. No?
Yeah, but that's not new to me. In other words, the other
other
topics were simpler. If you talk about anti-Semitism, you talk about moment of silence. Those are simpler topics. With Israel, the difference is that there's the urgency of getting it out quickly and people actually begging to know what it is, and kind of me being able to see that and, wanting to just get the ball rolling. But I'm going to have to go back to the regular programming, just like the Rebbe had to go back to regular programming on a regular basis. Hopefully we'll have better results if one can believe that we could have better results than the Rebbe, but it's the Rebbe who's getting the results. But the point is, the idea is to present it in a way that people can hear and understand, and it can begin to, germinate within each person and grow, and they'll see it and understand it and be able to run with it. We're not going to become, Shlema Sa'aretz central, just like, when we do a video on a certain topic and people say, oh, you did it on Hareini Mekabel and Ach Tzadikim, you did a thing, there are no stickers available, you guys should go print stickers. I'm like, whoa,
that's not your job.
Hashem, that's their job. Or we're doing now something on B'tachin.
So you feel this Israel thing is really outside your wheelhouse, just like you have there's no one else doing it, you have to do it?
The Israel thing does connect very strongly to video. And we do have a lot of centralized information in all the interviews we've done, all the research we've done, all the sichas that we have, etc. But it's also way beyond video. I think it's much, like I said, honestly, it's to this date, I haven't done a good enough job getting the rest of GEM, the structure and the people of GEM swept along with me. So it's kind of, I'm going solo with one other person, Leivik Korf, but whatever, the other people in GEM are helping quite a bit, but it's not like the whole organization has been swept away with it. And maybe I can make that happen so we can go back to regular programming more quickly.
I see.
But I don't know, I just feel that it's like it's needed. I don't see anyone else doing it. So it's like, okay, we're going to do this. And, there were people who helped support us to say, okay, keep doing this for another little bit, but then we're going to have to come back to regular programming.
Have you seen any difference in how Lubavitchers respond to content that has more of this, what you refer to as like thinking in fundamentals? I understand that people that are, dealing with it, or askanim, they would appreciate it more. But have you seen, typical Lubavitchers, let's say, beginning to realize that, wait a second, I can really understand a philosophy here as opposed to just marching orders?
You're talking on the Israel topic?
Well, yeah, because you happen to stumble into it. Have you
Absolutely.
seen? Right.
So first of all, you didn't ask this, but it's on a related note. Whenever I start one of these projects, I'm very, very self-conscious. Who am I? Your job is to publish the Rebbe's words. Like, what do you, maybe you should get someone else to be on camera. Also, it's also part of it. Like, but the bottom line is, I'm becoming more and more comfortable, and there are others who, speak into my ears about this. Like, stop it. Stop worrying so much. You're just transmitting it. And I guess my telling myself that I'm not doing something for the mass public, I'm just doing it to teach Anash and Shluchim, and they could take it further, each one in their format. All of those people who are big on social media, who I was referring to before, each one will do it in their own way. I just need to teach them what I've learned and let them obviously hear the Rebbe himself saying the key points. And, I don't expect or need to be the one whose video goes to everybody. I don't need people to know me specifically. But anyway, so I'm always very, very self-conscious. And then I'm usually pleasantly surprised by how little pushback there is. And of course, I'm very self-conscious. I ask around, nobody minded, there's not telling me about it, whatever. Meanwhile, thank God, it's been just fine, and quite the contrary. I had one call, one Zoom that we did like for senior Shluchim, heads of countries and states. And I don't know if they signed up for me to say their names, but it was really people far more senior than me. And I'll just name one person. Rabbi Tzvi Grunblatt was on there, and he's a chayzer. Like, I'm going to teach him sichos. Yeah. But the feedback that I got from that one was nice. And what they said was, what I appreciated most was that the other groups that I did, for the most part, many of them, including the ones with our donors, I did one with kind of some of our key donors, was, you got to get this to the top. How are we getting you into the Prime Minister's office? Which was not a bad reaction. And in the end, we did. But their reaction was, get us these materials so we can use them. For the most part, I'm generalizing. Because and I was thrilled with that, because my goal was that every shliach, once every shliach knows and understands this, they like how it works, what the Rebbe's approach is. They'll see that it's not that far off thing called Shleimus Haaretz that it was anxiety inducing because the Rebbe is screaming and that's not my shlichus. But so much of it is just Yiddishkeit 101 that if you're aware of it, you can project it outwards as appropriate for your particular shlichus.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because it's something that I actually started thinking about on the podcast with, I think it was Rabbi Nu, or maybe it's a different episode. In Chassidus, there's always this mashal that's brought, I think it's even a Maimer Chazal, that it takes 40 years, that, there's, that's brought as more as a mashal of the merchak between a Rav and a Talmud, but I think in the Gemara it's meant for something more literal, that there's a lag. Like the idea that the Rav says something, the Talmud just goes with it. As a soldier, you're expected to follow marching orders instantly, and that's a matter of life and death. But as a Talmud, it could take 40 years to actually internalize what was told to you in the first place. And maybe that's another way to kind of reconcile this tension of past and present, where, if I'm looking at a video of 40 years ago to try to feel like I'm living 40 years ago, one has a problem, a dislocation almost of identity, where like, am I here or am I there? But if I'm looking at that video or learning that sikha or learning this topic, because it may have taken 40 years to internalize what it meant, and we're just beginning to figure out what the Rebbe was thinking back then, maybe we believed that he was right back then, but very few of us saw in concrete what it would, how it would translate. It's become much more real. In Israel, I think it's a lot more, this subject's a lot more tangible, but it's everything really, right? Mashiach is probably the most obvious one, where I don't believe anybody really understands yet what the Rebbe meant with the Koch and Mashiach. I think it's something that's going to take time. I think it's taking time. That's just my personal feeling. But it seems to me like that's something that you're talking about here too, where, video is a remarkable way to preserve a message, to give us the opportunity to have that time to figure it out, which maybe wouldn't have been available otherwise.
With Israel, going back to Israel, part of what I think we did that's unique, and I don't think it's genius, but it's just unique. Maybe it's based on where I come from and the way I look at the world is, there's Oisias HaTorah, there's Oisias HaRav, there's the way the Rebbe taught things, and there's Olam Hazeh. And there's no question, like I don't need to be the one to come along and say it, that there's a gap going on. So people could ask, how could it be that what the Rebbe said, that like, how does it relate to what's going on? In fact, I remember one of the triggers for me to really, really jump in is I spoke to a very senior Defense Department person in Israel. It's like at the top levels of the Defense Department for many, many decades. It was the night before Blinken came. And he was just ois mensch. you have no idea what's going on here, and you have no, like, this is the what's going, the pressure on us, and I saw how just totally, and I reminded him, the Rebbe told you A, B, C, D in a somewhat similar scenario before. The bottom line is, certainly people who did not sit in Yechidus with the Rebbe is speaking a sikh, and a person can ask, so how does this connect to what's going on? But there's a direct connection, and the Rebbe is actually speaking, what he's saying is very relevant today. It's not an old message. It's not something that he said that went nowhere at the time, so it's a waste, God forbid, or all that. It's how do we take this and put this into words that people can hear and see as something that's uplifting and positive and actionable, and frankly, the only answer to what's going on. So that bridging that gap, maybe it's taken, unfortunately, 30 years, and what happens in Simchas Torah for this to come together. I'm hoping that this will be, enough. Whatever we do, that Hashem will bless the work of not just my hands, but of all Chassidim and all Jews and Klal Yisrael, that now we could listen to the Torah's approach without any further pain, God forbid. But that gap is definitely something that is on all of us to close. So the same way the Rebbe sends a shliach to Timbuktu, and their job is to really befriend and become a part of the life of the Jews of their city, shliach and shlucha, and bring Torah's message to them in a way that they will internalize, that the Rebbe himself can't do, just by broadcasting to them, by sending them tapes of the Rebbe's sichos. You're not going to do it. You need it to be brought to Olam Hazeh, and that's our job. That's the job of each of us.
Right. Yeah. On a happy note, I mean, I know the Israel is, it's not a happy story, but there is I don't know if the word is a silver lining on what you're saying, but there is something hopeful there, where a message that was perhaps dormant or felt inaccessible for so many years did in fact ring true at some point. Time is sometimes a blessing in that sense, where a message can become more internalized. And I think that's a hopeful idea, right? Where it's not just that there's this idea that we're holding on to and trying to kind of grab onto as it slips through our fingers, but to the contrary, with time, perhaps idea becomes more real and more tangible and more true to us. And to me, that's something hopeful. And I it sounds like that's what guides, that's what wakes you up in the morning.
Does. And it's not just me; it's a big team of people. Thank God, who
I
believe share my.
Right, but you're the one here on Sunday afternoon. Okay. Right? Is that a fair?
There are others here too.
Or the others are working. I did not mean to, God forbid, an exclusion of anybody else. But it's. I think there's a wonderful, hopeful message in that. And I know you're busy. You're talking about being very involved with Israel. You're here on Sunday afternoon. You must be here for other things. So I appreciate your time. This has been a wonderful conversation, and
thanks for coming. Thanks for having me.
And
that was an hour and a half already.
It's an hour and a half. I mean, we can go further, but I wanted
to share with you maybe one point on Israel, if you're good with that.
I'm good with it. Sure.
Okay. One of the key pillars of anyone who's listened to the Rebbe speaking about Israel's security is a law in the Laws of Shabbos, chapter 329, Simchin Chavtes, about if there's an invasion in a border city and you have a raiding party coming across the border and raiding, let's say, a warehouse of kashva tevin, let's say in the modern equivalent, toilet paper and tissues, something of very little value. Even if we know that they are not coming to hurt anyone, to kill, and they actually plan on going back, and I'm far away on Shabbos, there's no risk to anyone's life. So typically, if there's a fire in my warehouse, if there's somebody stealing from my warehouse on Shabbos, I can't go anywhere near there, let the fire burn it down. If it is a border city, you must go, pick yourself up from your Shabbos meal, gather an army or a party to fight them off, and take up weapons on Shabbos, risk your own life to fight with them, even though you know that they're not coming to fight. They're coming just to steal. Why is that? Because by allowing them this advantage of it being open before them without being challenged, you're giving them, in our words, a strategic advantage. And that strategic advantage, Torah tells us, you need to risk your life to fight that strategic advantage. Remember, no one's life is even at risk now. And the Rebbe talks about this halacha a lot. Once you understand this halacha well, you understand Torah is doing you a favor, and it's telling you that if you need to stand up right here before things get out of control, and if you don't stop it here, it's going to become something that is life and death. And that guides the Rebbe's entire the Jewish policy of self-defense. If you do anything that's going to give the enemy a strategic advantage, land, obviously, oil, anything at all that's going to give them a strategic advantage over you, that they can then, the land will be open before them to conquer, that you need to fight, including risking your life, even before they're threatening your life. And from here, we derive a whole set of rules. There's what we call the physics of pressure. Pressure only, continues to become worse and worse on the person who gives into the pressure. You may as well draw the line right there. And the Rebbe gives you the tools, and he teaches you how, based on this halacha, you communicate that to your allies, to your citizens, to yourself. The minute you know that something, even though it's not a threat to life today, but this is something that halacha tells you, you must stand up against, even risking your own life for it. You begin to perceive every question that comes to you in that way. And if you truly draw the line there, then the pressure is not going to get worse and worse and worse on things that truly are pikuach nefesh, even at the time. And the Rebbe advocates strongly that you need to first understand it yourself, and then communicate that outwards, and never budge from that. Because the minute you communicate it outwards, if you then budge from it, your allies or your citizens or your fellow people in the government or whatever it is will say, hey, that person's a liar. And they don't mean it seriously. It's not truly a threat to life. And that's how you'll end up in a terrible place. Yitzhak Shamir, of blessed memory, is the one who started the process. At the time it was Madrid, ended up in granting autonomy to the Palestinians. And he said, all I want to do is, we're going to talk. I'm agreeing to talk. I remember this. I'm not all that old, but I remember how heavy the pressure was then from Bush the first and Baker, and there were loan guarantees, and Israel needed those loan guarantees. And that said, all we want you to do is talk. And Shamir said, fine. The Rebbe said he was even tougher than Begin. He was a very strong, staunch hawk, right-winger.
Who is this Shamir?
Shamir.
Right.
And the Rebbe said, don't talk. If you go to these talks, giving them the understanding that you might be willing to bend, you're going to allow something to begin that you're not going to be able to stop. And in fact, there's a clip by Dollars of Eliyakim Rubinstein, who was his Secretary of State, Shamir's Secretary of State. 5.5 minutes, I believe it is. It's on YouTube. And he's talking to the Rebbe that, we're trying to explain to them that what for them is just foreign policy, for us is life and death. And the Rebbe, I don't think I've ever seen the Rebbe so impatient. The Rebbe touches him a few times while he's talking to him, and he's trying to explain to him, and he says, you keep saying that, but then a minute later, whatever it is you're arguing about, you give away, or you back down from. So you're not showing that you mean it. If it's truly life and death, so stop it. Don't continue, stop now. And Israel's made the same mistakes again and again and again. But all the rules, there's a set of rules, I think it's 8 rules that come out of this Shin Chavtes, and there's another 8 rules for Israel to handle its relationship with the United States that are based on that. But once you understand the fundamentals...
The rules come from where?
Shin Chavtes.
No, I'm saying who's codified these 8 rules?
Yeah.
You understand? Okay.
Yeah. And you could say 7, you could say 9, but it's like, here's what it means when you understand Shin Chavtes. And the same thing with, what always seems to be a headline, how to handle the Americans, this pressure, they're not going to provide arms, what's going to be? I'll just tell you one example of that is that the Rebbe explains that the Americans have to say what they have to say. Their job is not to protect Israeli citizens. That's one thing, and what Israel's job is another thing. But one of them is that there are times when the United States says things that they don't really even mean it. What does it even mean that the United States says something? It's a certain president at a certain time and place who's in a certain political situation. Let's look at today. There's a president who needs to be reelected, or it's pressure on him from this or that. So what does it even mean that America pressures? Okay, wait it out, until the next administration, until they get distracted by something else. But this particular rule that I just want to mention now is that they don't even always mean what they're saying. Rebbe talks about a specific example, 1956. Israel, the UK, and France went to war against Egypt, pushed them out of the Sinai because they were threatening, traffic in the Suez Canal. And they won. It was a tremendous victory. And came along the United States a short time later and pressured them. How did you do that? And pressured Israel to move away, to move all the way back and give back the Sinai and get off the bank of the Suez Canal. 3 years later, an American diplomat said to an Israeli diplomat, "Why did you guys pull away from the Suez Canal?" He was like, "What do you mean? You threatened an embargo, you weren't going to sell arms to us, that, whole big deal." I said, "We said it because we had to say it, but you guys, you're like the guy who lit his house on fire and then went to the insurance salesman and said, 'My house burned down.' So how could you do that? We said it, we didn't really mean it." I'm saying that's a specific example that the Rebbe gives. There are 7 or 8 examples. There are examples for when the pressure is very hard. What do you do? How do you handle it? And the Rebbe says it is possible that they will stop the provision of arms, but it won't be for long because they need you as a partner. And America needs Israel in certain times more than Israel needs America if Israel's strong. If Israel's weak, then Israel, the United States does not need Israel. Anyway, there's a whole list of how to handle the relationship, how to manage the relationship, but it all comes really from Shin Chavtes. The minute you truly understand that crossing this line is something I cannot do, your posture toward the United States is entirely different. I'm sorry, we're great friends, this is something, we just can't do it. We want to live. And when they see that you mean it over a sustained period of time, they'll work with you. Right. When Israel's all over the place, it's not going to work. Anyway, I'm trying to condense 7 or 8 different things into one, and these are individual separate bullet points that are very understandable, learnable, and they're going to work. When they're used, they work. There are many examples from the Rebbe in real time of things that were going on where they worked and where when they weren't used, it didn't work. Right.
But that's very interesting. But in the context of this conversation, what I would say is that for Lubavitchers that take an interest in this topic, right? It's first layer is okay. It's not just about the specific answer; it's about understanding the foundational thinking. But then you look at that Sif and Shulchan Aruch, and the first thing that jumps out to me is this isn't a Siman and Shulchan Aruch about Shleimus Haaretz or about Pikuach Nefesh. It's almost like I would imagine many people learn that Sif and it's more in Shabbos. It's probably interesting pilpul and Pikuach Nefesh that generally Pikuach Nefesh is deicha, but it has to be Pikuach Nefesh now, not Pikuach Nefesh down the road. But the fact that Torah sees Pikuach Nefesh down the road is important to be deicha Shabbos already now is already a whole part, I imagine, halachically. But it's still within Shabbos. But what's fascinating is that Rebbe took that sif and felt that not only he understands the proper geopolitical strategy in Israel based on that, but that it's that clear and that true that the secular or non-religious prime minister should also see things according to that. And so then you ask yourself a question, how did they think that? Where did he get that from? And where did he expect me or any other Lubavitcher or any other prime minister to see it that way, right? And so you go even deeper, and it's not just about a tool book that's in Shulchan Aruch, it's about the representation of Torah and how they ever saw the relationship of Torah to the world and how there were never let even an inch of distance between terror and reality. There was no such thing as like terror speaking in metaphors or terror is back in that, like there didn't give an inch between terror and reality. And so to me, again, that becomes, maybe I'm obsessing over the same point, but it does come back to that where, when the starting point has to and can get deeper and deeper, right? It starts off with a directive. The directive leads you to a fundamental way of thinking, and the fundamental way of thinking leads you to even more fundamental, and even deeper way of thinking, and that's ultimately the journey that one goes on, right? I mean, I'm not just trying to speak philosophy here, right? But when you go to a lot of times, I have been privy to these kind of, I'm sure many people listening to this have also been privy to these kind of like discussions or heated debates about what the Israelis ought to do, and is that kind of trope that one side throws out in the conversation, the Rebbe said to go to do this and to that, and someone says, well, wait a second, it's relevant, and it's like kind of these debates, let's say, and like to me the question has always been like, why should maybe you're right, why should a prime minister listen to you, right? Like you have to go deeper. It's not just like you believe that that's right, but like why should everybody else believe that, right? And you have to go deeper, and that's ultimately.
It was very gratifying, if that's the word. It was very nice that there were a couple points in the current conflict where I turned to the members of this think tank, and I said to them, and it was not something that there's a source for it directly in the Sichos. So based on what you know, what do you think the correct course of action? Take it or leave it. In other words, do this or do that at this or that crossroads.
They asked you.
No, I asked the group. I had a certain inkling.
My
little group, my little think,
I thought you were
my
talking
think tank of Shluchim, who by the way are an amazing group of guys who like really know these sichos well, and letters and things, and we argue and we talk about it. Just today we had a breakthrough of something kind of where we said, hey, we might have gotten the Rebbe's thinking wrong in this particular situation because there's no source for it. We just all assume A or B or C. So I said to them, what do you think the Rebbe would say? And every single one of them said the same thing, which means that the fundamentals, at least as it applied for these 7 people in the group, they all, were ready to make the same decision, as if anyone asked us what decision to make. But it was nice to see, and the same thing goes in many additional areas. So if you understand the fundamentals well, I would think that many of those arguments that you're talking about, what does the Rebbe hold, or what's the right thing to do, many of them go away. And I have to tell you, I do see many Lubavitchers or Shluchim or whatever it is making mistakes publicly, which is it's painful to me to see, but I don't blame them because no one's ever taught them, or they never were able to understand or to know the Rebbe's approach in a deeper way. Is it our job to be out there on social media proving to everyone that they really did, Rahman al-Islam, do what they did, on I hate to call it on Synthesizing, but on that day. And there are people who are out there and fighting, look, here's the proof and here's the pictorial. And is that the job? First of all, you're going to help anything with that.
It's apologizing already. It's a form of apology.
And second of all, if you understand the first pillar, which is our ownership of Israel, then you realize that it's actually hurtful. Right. What you need to be doing is saying why we belong here, and this belongs to us, and you are our guest. But you spoke about the bringing together. You mentioned about the bringing together of practicality. At least that's the way I heard what you said. I forgot the exact words that you said. But the Rebbe's approach, Torah, and I think that's what the Rebbe did in his Torah in general, and taught us, tried to teach us, hopefully succeeded, about the Olam Haza, this world, and Torah, and the Rebbe, and things that are going on in current events. The Rebbe says this about his own style of teaching. He speaks about the Lubavitchers, but about bringing together, unifying worlds. And I love, even when it comes to filmmaking, you're a filmmaker, so I always think of it when we are doing a more advanced film here in GEM, where it's audio and video and music and photos and whatever it is, and subtitles and this. And the more you can break genres and bring them together, that's where the beauty happens. So for the Rebbe it was, physics and Torah in this instance, and, Elam Haza, and whether it is the professor who came and the Rebbe working through, how Torah and science are not hostile to one another, and in general, to create people who are confident enough to walk, I'm saying what the Rebbe did, to walk in this world without fear and confident in their existence as a Torah Jew, and be able to understand that whatever I'm seeing, whatever's going on out there is not truly a stira to what I know. And I think you see that, frankly, throughout the Rebbe's Torah. At least that's what I see throughout the Rebbe's Torah. If you go into the Rebbe's Chassidus, I think it's maybe in a step beyond that. To me, the Rebbe's Chassidus is 3 words. Higher and lower. Whatever the Rebbeim before taught, the Rebbe finds how it truly goes all the way up higher than you thought you knew. It goes to Atzmos. Right. And lower means, the Baal Tshuva, the sinner, the Olam Haza, the whatever the case is. And, the Rebbe is going to stretch you higher and lower. But in the Rebbe's teachings and what the Rebbe taught us about everything that exists in Olam Haza, that Torah's approach is what governs it, and Torah's approach is the way, or Torah's lens is the way we're supposed to see it. I think that was, that's what the Rebbe teaches us on a regular basis. So if you get up in the morning and you think that, and you believe that, you see something going on in Israel, that Jews are suffering and the world is tummeling, the Rebbe taught us that Torah's approach is what can correct this, or is the way that we're going to get out of this in one piece and in good shape. So it's kind of like, okay, how can you sleep if you think that you know Torah's approach? You have to go teach it and share it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think I just go back to the idea that it's, Israel, while it's obviously a very present topic, and clearly for you it's a very consuming topic. I think it speaks to in general, right? And it speaks to all the topics that Rebbe talks about. It speaks to the topic that we've been speaking about, which is the digital interface with the Rebbe's Torah as well, right? It's not when you have this digital videos and all this media that never existed before, right? In many ways, it's not just that it happened to be that there was technology and there was lifetime that didn't exist before. It's apropos to how the Rebbe saw these things, that there's no space where like this isn't included in Torah as well, right? Torah has something to say about this too, and so like I find myself looking back at some of the questions I asked you earlier, and like the answer to those questions seems to be that if you look at it from a place of like dichotomy, that there's technology and there's a video and there's a book, there's a past and there's a present, all these kind of dichotomies that are true dichotomies, right? But if you get caught up in the dichotomy, then you start wrestling with certain tensions, and some of them could become problematic. Whereas ultimately the goal, I suppose, from the Rebbe's standpoint, is to see things from a place of unity, a place much, much deeper, where everything's expressing Torah, everything's expressing the Eibishter's will, right? And so that's like when I asked earlier, where's the starting point that starts the ecosystem around which the rest of the ecosystem revolves? It seems to me that that's the answer. The deeper you go, the more all this kind of fits in and makes sense. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Makes sense. Wonderful.
Can I finish with the concept then that I think follows from you? It can be seen as unrelated, but as you said, if you just go a little deeper, it's all related. Moshe Rabbeinu says about a Nasi, really saying it about himself, but when he's asking Hashem to find a new Nasi for the Jewish people, he says, Isha Shiluach Bai. He's able to connect with each person in their own way. You know, and I see so many people who are Chassidim of the Rebbe who have very, very different personalities and who recognize their relationship with the Rebbe or the Rebbitzin, and they were super close in their mind, maybe they were, and they cannot comprehend how that other person, who has a very different personality, who comes from a totally different place, had any relationship whatsoever. And yet, if you'll talk to them and their children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren, say, my grandmother, my grandfather, super close to the Rebbe or the Rebbitzin or whatever it is. And I think it's that the Rebbe was able, first of all, the Rebbe was able, as a Nasi, he was able to do that in a way that no one else can, because he's the Nasi of every Jew, including those people. So, as their Nasi, he was able to connect with them. But he was able to deal with the character of each one of them, and he saw their mindless. And I see this as a deficiency amongst many Lubavitchers. Maybe it's in the world as a whole. Maybe it's not unique to Lubavitch, and it's something that hurts me a lot to see. Whether it's, in the Moistus or whatever it is, that people are very black and white. And it's like, that person is bad, that person is good. My grandfather is good, so he doesn't have any chesroinus. That person did something bad, so he doesn't have any milus, doesn't have any, or that people evolve. Maybe that person was good, and then toward the end of his life, he took a misstep, he did something wrong, or vice versa. That person did something very negative at some point in his life, and then he became somebody very good, or some mix of that. And I would love, I know this can sound like I'm coming from left field, because how did that come from the conversation we're just coming from? But it just kind of triggered this thought by me, because I do see a connection with it. If we could learn from the Rebbe in that way as well, where yes, each of these people did have a relationship with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was able to be close with this one and that one who had total opposite personalities, and they're coming from different perspectives and that kind of thing. And that's the real beauty, just like the beauty of the Rebbe bringing together Elam Haza and Torah and all these different things, to be able to see one another as the Rebbe does. And when we're able to do that, if nothing else, we're going to get a lot more done. Just a thought. Did that connect at all to what we were talking about in your mind, or do I need to figure out how to make that connection?
No, it fits in very well, but it kind of makes it difficult to end on that note. But I don't think we have a choice.
I thought that was positive. I said we're going to be able to get a lot more done.
No, it's very positive, but it's like it's a world. Yeah, it's like absolutely. It does make a lot of sense. Anyway, I appreciate the time. I appreciate a lot of things that we spoke about. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for doing it. Hatzlacha Rabba. The music for this podcast comes from the album Repentance Doors by Oren Sor Nadav Vachar and is used with their permission.